an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering A Wizard Alone. Pages 200 to 253. Complications through part of entrapments. In these chapters, something is going on with Kit, and I'm unsure how to take it. I don't know how I feel about this overall, guys. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Patricia for commissioning this episode. What's up, Patricia? So, I wanted to, and I don't see the chat being active right now, so I'm not sure if this is really the place to ask, but people who are listening afterwards, you can chime in here. And I also asked this in the patron, or not the patron group, the Spoil Me planning group on Facebook. The commissions for this book series have been really slowing down, and people are saying that it's because it's hard to get slots, which has definitely been true. However, I have also recently gotten the final episode commission on several different properties, so the overall listing of shows has shrunk by quite a bit, which means getting slots is likely to be a lot easier soon. That said, I'm not certain if it is just that episodes slots were hard to come by, or if people aren't as enthusiastic about this series. And I'm just curious to hear what y'all want to do going forward. This book, so far, I have 2 more commissions, and that is more than enough to cover. There's only 75 pages left of the book, but it's just enough more than 50 pages that I don't want to do just one episode for the last 75 pages. That said, if somebody out there has read the last 75 pages and they do think that I can cover it in one episode and you want to start the next book, we can do that too. So I just want to kind of get y'all's feedback on that. And okay. I'm going to back up and we're going to talk about what's going on in complications. And to be honest, not a whole lot actually happens in this section, which kind of makes me wonder if I couldn't have read more. Because I just feel like I wound up having to hold back a lot. Complications starts off with Kit saying, "We're lost." And I was a little bit taken aback because I thought Kit had just talked to Nita and said, and basically told her that he was asleep. And it turns out that is correct. That is what he said, because he is asleep still. He, as we find out later, has wound up inside Daryl's head by accident. And I'm saying by accident, even though obviously Nita uses being asleep as a means to connect with Daryl. So it's not like that isn't an option. But that's clearly not what Kit is doing here. He didn't mean to wind up where he has. It seems like he was somehow drawn there simply because of it being on his mind, perhaps. Maybe talking to Nita and her just talking about Daryl to Kit while he was almost asleep kind of triggered that for him. Whatever the case, they have not arrived in Daryl's mindscape, which is what I think I'm going to call it from now on, the usual way, with Paunch as a guide. And that means that they are more vulnerable. And I'm not entirely certain why that is. There is definitely something going on with Paunch specifically, because Daryl looks at Paunch and recognizes Paunch as something important, and there is a suggestion that he is transforming a little bit, and Paunch seems aware of it also, but not the nature of it. He can just tell something is happening to him. So I'm wondering if that's the reason why when Kit travels with Paunch that he tends to be safer, you know? So let's see. Here it is. Okay. Kit wiped the rain off his face and turned to look back the way they'd come. It was nearly impossible to see where that was, for the path they'd been following was scarcely any wider than he was. The jungle all around them was a tangle of dark reds and dark greens, huge trees and undergrowth, vines and creepers and strange-looking plants. High above, the upper canopy of broad leaves held away the burning whiteness of the sky. Down here, precious little of that light reached. All the plants were in mud and blood colors, depressing, and the shadows in between them were worse. There were creatures in this jungle that had messy eating habits, and Kit had stopped looking into the shadowy places at the bases of the immense trees unless he absolutely had to. And this is when Paunch says, "We didn't do this the usual way. For one thing, neither of us is awake. For another, you went in first and I followed you because I didn't want you in here alone, and you didn't bring the leash." Kit sighed and put out his hand. "Leash," he said. Nothing happened. "You tried that before," Paunch said, "and it didn't work either." I don't know if he means you tried that before, like, earlier in the book and I'm just forgetting, or if Paunch means you just did that 5 minutes ago, because if that's what he means and Kit has forgotten that he did that, that's worrying also. So they don't know which direction to go in, and Kit sort of picks a direction at random because he figures they'll run into Daryl eventually anyway. And they keep hearing this screaming. This is a continuing theme, is the idea that the sounds or the mindscapes that they wind up in, that there is an effect in them that either amplifies the sounds of actual talking and dialogue or music or whatever that's going on around Daryl, or that it's a whole separate sound, but meant to mimic the feeling that Daryl gets from being overstimulated by sound. And I find this really interesting. For me, sound can be a major trigger for irritability. Everybody has their things that sort of bother them. And I think that, even outside, like when you're autistic, it's going to be a really different kind of reaction where it causes you to sort of shut down depending on how severe things are. But I think a lot of us know the effect that noise can have on your overall mental state. This can be true of either being in a house where there are a lot of small children who make a lot of noise, or if you have neighbors who are doing renovations and the construction sound is just nonstop, or something as simple as the videos being on autoplay on a website that you're on and you can't scroll by without something just starting to play. I have this personally when I'm playing a phone game that has built-in ads, and I'll be playing a game and just chilling and listening to an audiobook, and all of a sudden it gets interrupted with a volume 10 car advertisement, and it just makes me want to curl up and die. I hate it. So if I just think about my reaction to that, but it being how I react to all sound all the time, I can really sympathize with how awful that must be for somebody who is sensitive to that sort of thing. Here it is. Yeah, because he did forget, because he just yells out, "Daryl, where are you?" And Paunch says, "You tried that before too." "I forgot," Kit said. So yeah, he is forgetting things. I don't care for it. And he says, "I keep expecting Darth Vader to come out of one of these and chase me with a lightsaber." "I don't think that's a good thing for you to be imagining," Paunch said, sounding unnerved. "Let's stick to Daryl for now, and once we've found him, let's get out of here." So, as they're walking through, there's just this heavy humidity, which is something that Kit in particular hates. Same, by the way. I mean, most human beings aren't fans of humidity anyway. It's just not it isn't conducive to the way that a lot of us like to live. I often think about what it must have been like before we had air conditioning, because, I mean, plenty of people live without air conditioning still, but someplace like Texas, it is sort of standard now in houses because it gets so high here. Up in the Northeast, when I was like in Philly or in Connecticut, you could still find a lot of places that didn't have air conditioning. And I just, living that way, it's not fair anymore. We don't need to be living like this, guys. You know, it makes me so upset. And like everything, when it is humid, I even had this here despite the AC. If it's humid enough outside, everything just feels a little bit damp. And the smell of things can be more extreme because the humidity carries scents with it, you know? So this description I was like, oh, this sounds miserable. You smell anything? Kit said. Mold, Paunch said, his nose wrinkling, and other things. I don't want to talk about it. I wish Nita were here. I don't, Paunch said. I wouldn't want anyone I like to be here, and I don't want us to be here either. We're not going to find him this way, boss. Let's go home. Just a little while more, Kit said. He was beginning to agree with Paunch, he thought. He was beginning to agree with Paunch, though. He was just so tired. I should have walked out of here the minute I found myself in here, except I don't remember how I got in here. And that made me go, okay, is this the lone power? I feel like that feels like he got tricked somehow. That doesn't feel like it's a mechanism of his wizardry, and it doesn't feel like it's Daryl doing something on purpose, because Daryl doesn't, like, when he finally does come across Kit, he's not glad to see him. He doesn't think Kit should be here either. So, you know, I don't know. So let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. Yeah, here it is. I keep forgetting things. I guess it's just that I'm so tired after yesterday and the days before, but I can't help it. We can't leave him stuck like this. We have to find him. So finally, he gets up on this log. It was covered with dark brown goo, yet more mold of one kind or another. Kit made a face as he rubbed it off the branch as best he could, rubbed his hands more or less clean on his pants, then got up. And there are these monsters, so he calls them. He never sees them, out in the canopy of the trees, and he can hear them screaming. One big creeper was hanging down over the path. It was well draped with the dirty laundry fungus and looked almost like a curtain. They were going to have to push through this. There was no avoiding it. Kit reached out one hand to the creeper, while above him in the trees, the intolerable screeching got louder and louder. If there is something in there, Kit thought, I'm not going to be able to hear it if it's coming for me. Kit pushed the creeper aside. The gloom beyond the curtain of fungus was even worse than out in the shadow of the trees. So I have a theory here, based on what we wind up seeing of Kit later. It's pretty obvious as you're reading it what's happening, which is that somehow the symptoms of autism that Daryl has been experiencing, which are extreme sensitivity to sound, a feeling of disconnection from the world, and of like being preoccupied with something mentally, but not with the actual physical world that you're living in. He begins to experience that much more acutely after this visit, which he didn't voluntarily take. And I'm wondering if the lone power has manifested as this weird fungus, or because the lone power is sort of such a weird character in these books where I'm like, I can't tell if it manifests. We have seen it take over people. You know, it takes over the otter in the previous book and talks through its mouth. So it doesn't have to be in its human-ish form that we have seen before when it's like a red-headed young man. Can it manifest as something like this in Daryl's mind? And would Daryl not know that's what it was? Is touching this stuff and it getting smeared on Kit's hand so that he has to rub it off, is that some sort of symbolism for him absorbing some of this, like, this feeling of fogginess overall? And this is what I meant when I started off the episode and I said I wasn't sure how I felt about it, because I am really torn on the concept, which is presented a little bit more later on when Nita is thinking about how things have gone. The concept seems to be that the more Kit visits Daryl, the better Daryl becomes at communicating, and the worse Kit's relationship to the world around him seems to be. And that's just a little bit too dancing around the whole idea of like this neurodivergent person is like infecting a normal person with their problems. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if that's purposeful. It's really hard to know because, like, you guys have told me about how the book has been updated significantly since its first writing because the author was attempting to correct some of the more ableist language or concepts. But the idea of this overall seems somewhat ableist to me, and I don't know if the update can fix that. You know, what do you do if you realize that the overall concept of something isn't any help more like better than your corrections? Do you just like take the book off the shelves? Like you can't, if it's in a series to a degree, it has to still be there because I'm certain that the next book is going to try and build on some concepts that were introduced in this one. So what do you do as an author here? And this is this is part of why I'm curious about everyone's interest in continuing to commission this series, because I can't help but read into the fact that this book is the one for which commissions have been the least consistent. And I wonder if this is related to the fact that maybe folks are a little bit uncomfortable with the subject matter of this book. I don't know if that's it at all. It could be completely unrelated. It may just be circumstantial, you know, and that's certainly valid. But I also wonder if this is something that, looking back, the author wishes that she could have done differently. Does that apply to future books as well? And is there... I just really want to know people's feelings toward this book overall and the remainder of the series too. So I'm just curious about it. And like I said, I don't want to like leap to judgments here. To a degree, I understand what she is trying to do, but there is... I don't know if this author personally has any experience with autism, either personally or with family, but anytime that you've got somebody who isn't part of a community that they are writing about, they've got to tread really, really carefully. And I am not sure this is the look she wanted to go for. So I just wanted to, share that in general regarding the concept of this whole thing, because it feels like what's happening is Daryl is sort of like stealing Kit's normalness away for his own uses, and Kit is being left without that and being left sort of disabled by it, and it's just not quite hitting for me. And Jacob says, by the way, the version you're reading is the original. The way autism is covered has made it difficult to listen to at times. So I am reading the original. I couldn't remember. Thank you, Jacob, for reminding me. I'm curious if this aspect of it, with Kit's perception of the world and his relationship changing, is still carried out in the rewrites, or if this was changed completely. I don't know how extensive you can make those sorts of corrections. I just genuinely I'm not sure. But Yama says, hey, I made it. Sorry, I'm in the middle of like a heavy question here, and I'll briefly repeat it. I'm worried that some of the reason why commissions have been inconsistent for this book have been because people aren't super happy with the depiction of autism and the way it's being talked about, and Kit being sort of, it's being implied that he's been sort of infected by it, while Daryl is like stealing Kit's normalcy so that he's becoming better at communicating than he was before. And it's really towing a line for me that I find a little bit questionable. Like I said, there's still 75 pages left in the book. So it's like, I don't want to leap to conclusions yet, but it's hard when there really are, it's less than 2 episodes worth of material to feel like that can be totally turned around. Jacob says, as I remember, that part is removed. Interesting. Because that's like all these 2 sections, this 1 chapter and the half of a chapter that I covered to reach 50 pages. That's pretty much all of it, is coping with Kit acting strangely and it feeling like he is becoming more and more like Daryl. So if they removed that, is the book just way shorter? Or did they replace it with something else that feels a little bit more sensitive? Yama says, I gotta tell you, the end isn't good. I decided to just finish it and okay. And I asked in the Spoil Me group whether folks wanted to continue commissioning the series, because I don't know if the books after this are, maybe she never touches on subject matter like this again and it's never an issue. Maybe it's fine, or maybe not. I just am wondering about continuing the series, because it's going to be a lot easier to find slots coming up. There are a lot of series that commissions are finished. I haven't actually gotten to them and covered them yet, but the actual process of finishing commissions is done. So I'm going to be down to like 5 titles soon, and it'll be a lot easier to find slots. So, if that really truly is the reason why it wasn't getting carried out, if people want to continue with Young Wizards, that should be easier. But if that's not it, I'd rather take it off the docket entirely, because I don't want to limp along through something that's like potentially problematic or upsetting for people to listen to. Anyway, I'm sorry, guys. I know that those of you who were here from the start heard all that already, and I'm repeating myself. My bad. So, yeah, I just kind of thought that this, like, the mention of this fungus and the humidity and this sort of feeling of, like, being stuck and getting, like, dirty, for lack of a better way of saying this, it felt like it was related to Kit's symptoms later on. So any hope Kit had that being in this closed-in space might somewhat muffle the awful screeching from outside was in vain. If anything, it seemed worse. He moved softly among the trees, brushing past the down-hanging loops and rags of fungus, trying not to touch them more than he had to. Where the fungus brushed him, he got an uncomfortable, itchy feeling even through his shirt. Again, it just feels like that's like the thing that's doing this to him. Yama says, I'm on board for commissioning it again, but I'm reading along and I don't know how the next book is going to be. Yeah, okay. So if anybody out there has read them, let us know. So at this point, he begins to sort of freak out. And he hears something and he thinks he sees a shadow and he just breaks out into a run. At this point, he's feeling really threatened. And once he nearly throttled himself by running into a creeper that was hanging exactly at throat height. Kit reached just in time to grab it and used it to swing himself a little sideways. And again, it just feels like there's just too much contact with whatever this is. I don't like it. He wobbled down the path again. His body didn't seem to be working right, and he couldn't understand why, unless it was just the weariness. His legs almost seemed to belong to someone else. His brain was full of noise that he couldn't stop. He knew Paunch was behind him, but he had to keep reminding himself of that. He couldn't get rid of the idea that he was all alone here, had been alone forever, except for something that hated him. It was hiding in the shadows. It was up in the furious brightness above the trees. It was dripping from every leaf, underfoot, and every square inch of mud, looking at him with cruel, small, burning eyes from up among the branches of the trees. Kit ran, but his body wouldn't obey him, wouldn't let him run fast enough. So, eventually, he gets gripped up and starts to flip out, thinking that whatever it is he imagines is chasing him has finally caught up to him. And then finally he realizes that it's Daryl. He hauled Kit nearly upright, but Kit didn't have the strength to stay that way. He collapsed down onto his butt again in a most undignified manner. "Have to get up now," Daryl said. "It's coming." Kit tried and had trouble. And Daryl helps him to his feet. And Kit says thanks and then says, "I've been trying to catch up with you for a long time. Can we go somewhere and have a quiet talk?" "No," Daryl said. And Kit's like, "Dude, you don't get it. We got to get out of here. I think it's coming." And Daryl's like, "Yeah, that's why I can't leave. There are still things I have to do here and in all the other heres. It doesn't matter whether..." He stopped as if searching for the words. "It doesn't matter what else might be here. It doesn't matter if there's a way out. I can't take it. I have to find the thing that still needs to be done before I can go." Kit had been tired enough to start with, but now the exhaustion was coming down on him hard. And I said I'd stay until what I came to do was done. The silence said, So here's what it's all about. Here are the words. What are you going to do about them?" They were clear that first time, but after that, it was hard to hear them all at once. Every time I tried to make sense of them, the noise would get in the way. Once or twice, the shouting got so loud, I thought I'd die of it. Maybe only once or twice after that, it got quiet enough for me to think. But finally, I knew those words were what needed saying, though I had trouble visualizing what they meant. It took a long time to picture them, longer to say them, days and days. I kept forgetting. But finally I got them all together and said them. "In life's name." Kit sat there, listening to the words. Part of him knew them better than he knew almost anything else, but another part of him thought, wearily, "Why does that sound familiar?" And the roaring and screeching in his head were once again making it hard to pay attention, hard to care about anything. "I will fight to preserve what grows and lives well in its own way." So this is when we get more about him, Kit, thinking about this sound and how exhausting it is for this sound to be in your head, sort of tormenting you. The noise got into your head and wouldn't let you alone. In the face of that torment, you quickly got to the point where the pain was itself reassuring, something you could rely on, less stressful than trying to think or do anything through the cacophony of life. And when you come right down to it, it doesn't really matter. Nothing matters that much. Nothing's worth all that struggle. To these ends, in the practice of my art, I will put aside fear for courage and death for life. Not that any of those matter. The world seemed dim and far away. This world, any world. And it just feels like in this moment when Daryl is talking to Kit is when Kit really sort of gives in, is the feeling, to whatever is trying to overtake him. This feeling of hopelessness and distance and overwhelm. This isn't the right way to be here. It's dangerous like this. It's a way to get linked to me by a link that can't be broken, to keep getting sucked back into the trap I've set. So that feels like it's exactly what's happened, because later on, Kit promises Carl that he won't go back. And yet he finds himself going anyway. And it doesn't seem like he's even quite aware of what he's doing. It doesn't seem like he could have resisted. It seems far out of his control. And like his free will is sort of turned off. Kit saw Daryl catch sight of Paunch. Daryl froze. Kit turned to look toward him, not understanding what he was seeing. Daryl and Paunch looked at each other. Paunch stood there with his head up, his tail wagging. It was a speculative look on Paunch's part. He was no more sure what Daryl was reacting to than Kit was. You, Daryl said, you have to go. So I'm sort of wondering if maybe Ponch is going to wind up also being a pillar and he's like in danger being here. I don't know. And Ponch promises, we won't leave you here. We'll be back. He grabbed Kit by the wrist with his teeth, pulled Kit back into the dimness of the stand of trees that surrounded the path. The darkness increased and the screaming. Finally, the blackness became total and Kit staggered through it, blinded, deafened, being led by the hand, aware of nothing except that he was being led and hoping it was to somewhere better. So he tumbles into bed here, and it's, again, emphasized that nothing seems to matter. He feels this total disconnect from everything. So Nita gets a call the next day from Carl, who is like, dude, have you talked to Kit? Because he was supposed to come and debrief Tom yesterday. Today. And Tom's out of town, but he told me to, expect him, and he hasn't shown up. And that's not like him. He takes this job pretty fucking seriously, and he knows better than that, and he wouldn't just ghost me. And Nita checks in mentally and is like, yeah, he's still asleep. I can tell him to go and find you. And when she mentions to Carl here that she thinks Daryl is one of the pillars, Carl is like, what? Shit. Okay, come over and explain to me why you think this. This is one of those things where I'm like, this entire conversation that she winds up having with him could definitely have taken place over the phone, but it's always a conceit of books and TV shows that people go and see each other in person for everything. It's fine. So she goes over there and let's see. That's right. I forgot. Carl says something to Nita like, does your mom or dad know a good electrician? And then he realizes what he has said. And he is so apologetic. And it's one of those things that is really I think a lot of us have probably stuck our foot in our mouth in this sort of way. And it truly is, you just want to die after you've said it. You're like, oh my God. So she pulls out her manual and he says, there's something I want to check. Tell me what you've been up to. He opened Nita's manual, turning to one particular page and spoke to it softly under his breath. The page filled up with characters in the speech, cleared itself, and filled again, while Nita told Carl about the dreams she'd been having, how she decided to look into them more closely, and what she found. When she finished, he let out a long breath. What were you looking for? It's all right, it's nothing bad, it's just the information you've been given normally isn't made public. Someone at a higher level has seen to it that you got it, so I see from the authorization logs. And Carl asks her, tell me what this kid seemed like to you. So I'm going to read what she says, and then I'm going to read a quote from something that reminded me of this a lot. She says, innocent. He's absolutely innocent, but he's fierce about it. It just rolls off him. Even when he was screaming, I still liked him a lot. He's really good. And he just doesn't notice, doesn't seem to get it. And let's see, here it is. She says, I never thought goodness could be so tough. But then I guess goodness isn't something I think about a whole lot anyway. Nobody uses the word much unless it's in a commercial. And then they're just trying to convince you something has a lot of milk in it, which is such a funny and very specific thing. But she's totally right. So this is, Carl says, virtue, the real thing. It's not some kind of cuddly teddy bear you can keep on the shelf until you need a hug. It's dangerous, which is why it keeps people so nervous. Virtue has its own agenda, and believe me, it's not always ours. The word itself means strength, power, and when it gets loose, you better watch out. And she says because something bad might happen, and he says impossible, but possibly something painful. And she says the manual makes Abdals sound like saints. Oh, they are saints, Carl said. That aspect of their power doesn't have anything to do with the wizardry as such, though it can coexist with it the same way you could be a mathematician and a really nice person. The trouble with sainthood these days is the robe and halo imagery that gets stuck onto it. People forget robes were street clothes once and still are in a lot of places. Halos are to that fierce air of innocence what speech balloons in comics are to the sound of the voice itself, shorthand. But most people just see an old symbol and don't bother looking behind it for the meaning. Sainthood starts to look old-fashioned, unattainable, even repellent. Actually, you can see it all around once you learn to spot it. And she says you make it sound like there are saints all over the place, and he's like, oh, there are. But they're not obvious. They don't want to draw the lone one's attention, and they tend to be too busy. Mostly, sainthood involves hard work. So this really reminded me of something. I'm trying to remember who it was that suggested to me to read the Phryne Fisher book series by Carrie Greenwood. Was it you, Ariel? I'm wondering if Ariel's listening to this. Was it you? I feel like it might have been you. But the book series was turned into a TV show. So first I watched the show, and then I went and found the books, which are a lot of fun. And there was this entry at the beginning of one of them. She is the main character, whose name is Phryne Fisher. She is going to be in a parade for like some charity that is being organized by this woman named Miss Jones. And I went and found this quote because it just reminded me of this so much. Miss Jones was the type of person who was concealed, like the nun in the foundation, in every organization which does good works. Patient, dogged, meticulous, vastly overworked, unpaid, and completely unappreciated, she finds, files, calls, arranges, soothes, and ameliorates papers, contracts, tradesmen, repairs, hurt feelings, and very important people. No one notices her until God finally calls her home, or she quits to look after her aged parents, when the whole edifice instantly falls, astonished, to the ground. Repeated harassment usually grays her hair and causes her to lose her glasses, and pressure of work requires her to clothe herself in serviceable garments, which are never decorated in anything more daring than a scarf or possibly a bluebird brooch. But Miss Jones's strength was as the strength of 10, because her heart was pure, and Phryne liked her very much. That just gave me the same vibes. I went and tracked it down because I was like, this makes me think of something. And, yeah, the idea of like, oh, they're super busy because being a saint is a lot of work. That rings true to me. Like there's this whole sort of mental picture that I have with the idea of sainthood as being similar to the idea of like ascension and growing enlightened. And whenever I think of enlightenment, I just think of somebody fucking meditating on a cliff edge somewhere, floating in perfect balance with the universe and not even needing to eat or drink anymore because they're just like beyond humanity's minor needs. But really, when you think of like what a saint should be working on, which is like justice and the care of people who don't have resources, that does sound like a whole lot of work, actual work, and probably sort of thankless work. The kind of thing that you just have to satisfy yourself with the fact that you made a couple of people's lives a little bit better for a while. You don't necessarily solve problems. You know, you don't fix things entirely. And you have to be okay with that. And it's an ongoing fight. And that's the thing with Daryl is like the vibe that Nita gets from him when she's seeing him as that statue of a knight who is aware that this fight is never going to be over, but is fine with that. He is like, yeah, that's my job. My whole job is to like keep fighting it. And that's what I'm doing. Totally fine. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that here. So the whole point of the way they function is they're not supposed to know what they are. And the more mortals who do know, the more might let it slip. Daryl is important. Far more important in the larger scheme of things than you or I, or just about anyone else we know. Obdals don't exactly grow on trees. Well, actually, in some places they do. I liked that too. I thought that was fun. If you'll pardon the plumbing analogy, think of us as faucets, and Daryl as the reservoir or the well. Cut that off, and Carl shook his head. And Carl's theory is that Daryl might be the only one the Earth has. I'm wondering if there isn't Paunch, but who knows, you know? So this is when Nita is talking about what's going on with Kit and that things feel weird with him lately. So she pops back into her own backyard and she goes and talks to Daryl for a little bit. Dareen's working on a model of a volcano that she's making for her science class, which I thought was pretty fun, which is Olympus Mons. I think is Olympus Mons on Mars? You know what? I'm going to look this up. But yeah, this, I found this really fun that like she's doing a science project that's like so far beyond what even the teacher could understand about it. You know, that makes sense though with Dareen. That seems to be a theme with her, is that she's like outpacing most people around her most of the time. Nita, but like in her downtime in this section, is working on card tricks because she keeps thinking about how she's going to have to like show what she's learned to her counselor. And I just can't stop laughing about this because, first of all, I stand by what I said in thinking that her counselor is probably a wizard and knows something. And that's part of why she felt some inexplicable urge to blurt this out in front of him. And also, even if she didn't, if a kid tells you that they're super into magic and you ask to see a trick, it wouldn't be that surprising if they couldn't do it. And I don't think anybody would ever be like, oh, well, clearly you were lying then. You know, like she's just so worried about getting this right because she wants to cover her slip. And she's obsessing over it to a point that I don't think is necessary in the least, you know. I bet he'll forget what he fucking even said. So she mentally connects with him finally and asks Kit if he's awake. And she says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "I guess so." Nita raised her eyebrows. This wasn't exactly a normal response for Kit. Either he was okay or he wasn't, but the middle ground wasn't usually an option for him in Nita's experience, especially when he sounded as dulled as he did. "I'm coming over in a while," she said. "There's some stuff I have to show you." "Okay." And that was it. Either he's exhausted, Nita thought, or there's something wrong. So she thinks to herself, I don't really feel like it's exhaustion, though. That doesn't seem like it. And on her way out, she stops and asks Dareen for her help. And it's this really like heartbreaking moment where Dareen is like, "Are you sure you want to rely on me? Because I couldn't help Mom." And I just sort of keep expecting this to like be in the past. And why would I think that? This girl's mother died. You know, of course she's still going to, like, she probably will never get past this for a decade. It'll just probably be something that she just carries for her whole life. And she'll just have to grow a sense of forgiveness toward herself. So, yeah, I don't know why I'm surprised that that got brought back up again, but it was really sad. It was an awful moment. So Nita comes in and runs into Kit's sister, who mentions the whole thing with the TV and everything again. And she says, Kit says Kit thinks we're having some kind of wizardry leakage in the house. Mama can hear Paunch. Pop and I can hear the TV when it shouts at the DVD. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with Daryl too, or if that's like a whole separate thing. I can't remember. I think that this all started before his contact with Daryl, so it might just be unrelated, or maybe it's in relation to Paunch. Maybe that's who is sort of behind whatever's going on in the house. So Nita goes upstairs. "Hey," she said. Kit glanced over at her. It was the least interested glance Nita could remember seeing from him in some time. Why doesn't he just come out and say he wishes I wasn't here? Nita thought, shocked. But it occurred to her then that she'd been distant enough with him lately. Maybe he was giving her a taste of her own medicine. that wouldn't normally be his style either. But if he's really feeling sick, maybe he's just saying what's on his mind, stuff he'd keep to himself otherwise. Nita felt briefly guilty, then put the feeling aside. You look kind of out of it, she said. Yeah, Kit said. I feel that way too. I didn't sleep real well after I got in it last night. And he just isn't talking to her, and she keeps sort of thinking about how she behaved. And it's interesting because obviously what's going on with him isn't depression, if we're to believe that it's related to Daryl. But it does bear a lot of the same markers in some ways. A feeling of being disconnected from things, of there being a reduced importance to everything going on around you. And so she keeps sort of reminding herself that he coped with her behavior when she just was not engaged with anything, and it's sort of a weird moment because she's on the one hand trying to extend to him that compassion and understanding because she knows that she was probably really difficult, but she can't help but still take it personally during certain moments, which is such a relatable thing. If you live with somebody who copes with depression, it can be really hard to simultaneously hold the understanding that this is a symptom of what they're going through alongside feeling frustrated at the symptom. You want them to be more engaged with things, more engaged with you. But at the same time, you're aware that the very nature of what they're going through prohibits that. And so you have to sort of hold space for both things. And it can be difficult to have that kind of compassion alongside your own feelings of not just frustration, but wondering if it's you, if they are upset with you, if they don't want you around specifically. It can be really difficult to sort those feelings out. So he says that his mom got into his face over the fact that he was so late home. The timing got blown, that's all, but it doesn't really matter. Nita looked at Kit with concern. That was a theme she'd been singing too much herself lately, and Nita wasn't going to be indifferent to it when someone else started in on it, which I do find funny. That's how we are, right? When we say something fucked up, we're just well, but our friend says it, and all of a sudden we're like, okay, that's worrying. Yeah, no shit. We should be worried ourselves also, but it just doesn't feel that, it doesn't hit like that when it's us. So Neats, I'm sorry. He trailed off. It wasn't that he was too tired to pursue the thought. It was just that he didn't care. Okay, Nita said, and got up. Look, call me when you feel better. There's stuff we have to discuss about Daryl, but go see Carl first. And she tells him that, it's serious. He's concerned and he really wants to see you. And when she goes downstairs, Ponch follows her, and they talk outside on the front step, and she's like, what's going on with him? He's sad, Ponch said, but there's more to it than that. I'm sad too, and I'm afraid. Something's happening to him, and I don't know how to stop it. It's about Daryl, isn't it? We were there again this morning. Again? I thought you went last night. We did. I took him there, but the second time we went, he started to go by himself. I had to follow him. It wasn't easy. He wasn't going the way I go. Was he dreaming? Yes. Lucid dreaming, though? The guided kind? No, he was worried. The dream took him there without him wanting to be there at first. Then he couldn't get out. They were getting alike. Nita pondered this. Her own non-lucid dreaming had brought her to Daryl, or Daryl to her, and those dreams hadn't been good either. But this experience, at least as Ponch described it, sounded slightly different. I bet their minds are starting to get locked together because of all the time Kit's spending in there. This is not good. And reality doesn't feel terribly real to Daryl, Paunch said. I think it's starting to feel the same way to Kit. That would make a nasty kind of sense, Nita said. Paunch, I don't think you should take him back in there for a while, at least not until he's feeling better. And when you go, I want to go with him. I want you to do that too. So at this point, she listens to the dogs, because there are a bunch of them that are howling up and down the street. And she asks Paunch, what's going on? And he says, I think it's because I'm afraid. I think they hear me being that way, and they're upset for me. And she says, yeah, that's not it, though, is it? There's something else going on with you. I don't know, Paunch said. I don't know what it means. I don't have the words. But I'm frightened for me, too. The howling down the street got a lot louder, and Nita suddenly found herself thinking it wouldn't be smart right now to press the question any further. She put an arm around Paunch and roughed his fur up a little. We're both nervous about a lot of things, big guy, she said. I'll be glad when the boss is better, but listen. Right now, as soon as he gets up, Kit needs to go see Carl. He's not in the mood to listen to me right now, I know how that is. But he needs to go anyway. Will you nag him and get him to go over there? And he says yes. And Nita heads out. And she thinks to herself, at least once, Paunch had answered a thought in her mind, not something she'd actually said out loud. And I kind of went back and looked at some of this. And I couldn't find the moment where that happened. It felt like she asked all the questions. Oh, wait, here it is. I bet their minds are starting to get locked together, she thought. This is not good. And then he says reality doesn't feel terribly real to Daryl. That one she didn't say out loud. Yeah, that's interesting. So then we get partially into the next section, entrapments. Like I said, I had to stop reading partway through the chapter because it didn't end in a good spot for 50 pages. So Kit goes to see Carl, and Carl takes his debriefing and then is like, hey dude, okay, level with me. What's the deal with you not coming in and doing this the way that you're supposed to? And Kit tries to be like, well, I have like that auto thing happening where it's like taking records and reporting them. And Carl's like, you know, that's not good enough. This is like a really, not only do I need more context, but this is something that's particularly unique that's going on. So I need more in person from you. And you have to know that. It's not like you to let this slide. Okay, Kit said. Carl looked at him with an expression that suggested he was expecting to hear something else. At last he said, which brings me to the next thing on the list. The powers certainly don't expect you to work on a project so hard you neglect your own well-being. Neither do I. You look terrible. I want you to take a couple days off. And I thought this was interesting. As a senior, it's not beyond my abilities to put a freeze on your wizardly exertions for the next day or 3. I would prefer not to have to do that. It's undignified for both of us, and it also sends a signal to the powers that there might be a problem with the way you're using the art. I would much prefer to hear you tell me that you won't do any further exploration of Daryl's inner worlds until Tom and I have some time to work out what seems to be the best way to proceed. This may sound cruel to you, but he's been holding his own for the past 3 months at least. I would guess he'll hang on for a day or 2 more. And Carl waits for him to reply, and when Kit doesn't, he says, do I have your word? Kit said. Carl gave him an exasperated look. Even among non-wizards, it's considered impolite to grunt. I promise, Kit said. Good, Carl said. Thanks. So, what winds up happening? Kit winds up being pulled into the world again. Despite his agreement here. Doesn't seem to even, as he puts it, the promise that he made to not go felt like it was made by an entirely different person. So, I wonder if at this point Carl had put a block on Kit's abilities. Would that have helped the problem? Or does Kit need to remain connected with Daryl in order to undo whatever it is that's happening to him? And maybe putting a block on his abilities would have made it worse in the long run. You know? I don't know. I'm curious about that. Because I could see either way. And Kit goes home from this meeting with Carl, and on the way, it says the daylight seemed to be reaching him through some kind of filter. Sound seemed distant, and he didn't even seem to be able to feel his clothes properly. They seemed to bother his skin where they rested on it. The feeling was like what he got sometimes when he was coming down with a cold. I liked that comparison a lot, because the idea of clothing feeling uncomfortable on your skin is one that I have a hard time relating to. But the coming down with a cold, or like, you guys know how that is. When you're starting to get sick, your whole body aches in a way that it feels very oversensitive. And it's part of why you immediately, it's not just like the mental coziness aspect. You want to get into your softest clothes and softest blankets because you are oversensitive and ache in a way that you don't normally. So putting on a bra with underwires in it on a regular day is just a bra with underwires. Like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's like fine. But the thought of doing that when you are not feeling well and you have that sensation going on your skin, it's just like, I can't do it. And it's a very different thing. So that sort of helped me to understand the concept behind being uncomfortable in that specific sort of way. So he gets home, and at this point, his mother starts to talk to him, and he notices that her voice is bothering him in a way it doesn't normally. It's grating on him. And he wonders maybe if she's getting a cold too, because that's what he's sort of attributing all of this to. He's not thinking clearly about the obvious connection here, which I think is part of the symptoms of, just not making those connections. So she says to him, I meant to thank you. It's been so much quieter. Sorry? The little dog down the street. Tinkerbell, you mean? I haven't talked to him. You haven't? Sorry, Mama, I've been busy. Well, he got quiet again. Relatively quiet, anyway. There was some howling earlier, but it didn't last long. And I'm just so curious about what that's all about with the dogs. I really want to know. That combined with the TV, it's just weird, So finally, Kit realizes he feels just too weird, and he says that he thinks he might go lie down again for a while. And he tries to, she tries to see if maybe he's getting sick, puts her hand on his forehead, and can't tell anything, so he just gets up and goes to bed. Shortly, Kit was lying on his back again, gazing at the ceiling, the manual lying open, pages down, on the bed beside him. He didn't even hear Ponch come in and circle around once to lie on the braided rug by the bed, looking up at him with troubled eyes. And after a while, Kit turned over on his side again and just stared at the wall. And Nita is at home doing her card trick practicing. And we have this, Kit gets pulled in against his will, not wanting to go in. But like desperately wanting to go in. When I say not wanting to go in, it makes it sound like he's resisting. He's not resisting, but it is clear he is not in control of himself too. So he keeps telling Ponch, we've got to go. And Ponch, sprints downstairs, gets the leash out of the closet, and brings it back up to Kit just before Kit sort of completely loses control and gets pulled into the world anyway. And it seems like Ponch being with him is going to be key. If Ponch had not accompanied him, shit sounds like it would have been, or it will be, a lot worse. So, yeah, you promised you wouldn't. It seemed now as if a different person entirely had made that promise. In fact, someone different had made it. Another person in another place, different from this. The only reality that really mattered, now reforming itself around him. So, Kit hears him say, "Stay there, boss, Kit. Stay! Stay!" The urgency was just enough to keep Kit where he was. That was all that could be hoped for. There was no telling whether the hope would ever be realized, but it was the only hope in the world, and hence it was worth clinging to. The sound of paws scrabbling up the steps was as distant as everything else. The creature looked up at him, the only gaze he could stand, the only eyes that didn't hurt him. "Boss, take the leash. Take it, put it around your wrist." Kit couldn't see the point, but the creature's eyes were so beseeching that he did as he was told. As he looped the other end of light around his wrist, the world in which he was standing finally became totally irrelevant. Kit took the step forward into the real world, or into the one that had become real. At this point, his mother comes to check on him, and when she finds that his bed is empty, she knows some shit is wrong. And she calls Nita's house, looking for Kit to see if he's visiting there, but she knows. Like, she's got her instinct, and she's like, this isn't okay. And Nita realizes immediately, oh, he's gone. She, tries to check in with him mentally. She looks in the manual, and it says that he is out of ambit. And she gets in touch with Carl, finally. She reassures Kit's mom she's going to track him down. And she's sitting there kind of freaking out, like, what if I can't get him out? And there's a really sweet moment with her dad. Her father saw the look on her face and came over to her and put his arms around her. "Nita," he said, "listen to me. You're tough. You're tougher than you think. That's what you need to hang on to now. That's what I've been hanging on to the best I can. And as far as I can tell, it turns out to be true every time if you just don't let the idea go. What you have to do now is take one thing at a time. Don't let the stress overload you. Will Tom or Carl know what to do? Call them." I really appreciated this because her dad has felt MIA due to his grief. And to a degree, I understand that, but also he is the authority figure in this situation, and I want him to be there for his kid. So I appreciated him stepping in here. And she calls Carl, and Carl says, Ponch went with him, so at least that is something. Let's see, where is it? "I'll go try to find them." "I wouldn't do that right this minute," Carl said. "They may still be in transit. Give the situation an hour or two to settle." And she's again, bugging out. And he says, "Take a breath. I know how you feel. But even if you'd already done the pre-sleep preparation you need to do for a lucid dreaming session, which I don't think you have, you'd still need to get to sleep after that. And you know you can't induce it with a sleep spell when you're going lucid. You're going to have to relax a little, enough to sleep, or you won't be able to do anything." So, she sees Doreen standing there when she gets off the phone, and she says to her, "Let's start building that power feed spell." And they head up the stairs, and that's the end of this section. There's a break where I stopped. So like I said, it looks like there's about 75 pages left in the book. 2 episodes have been commissioned beyond this one. So I'm planning to split that into 2, that 75 pages into 2 sections of, 35. Unless you guys think that I can just do all 75 pages in one episode and it not be a problem, and you want me to move on to the next book. If you don't want me to, I can just do, split it up like that. But if you do want me to, I can do either way. It just sort of depends on what everybody is looking for here. I don't want to start the next book with just 1 episode worth and then never come back to it. So, yeah, just putting it out there. But thank you guys again for commissioning this series. I'm sorry that I'm having so much trouble with this book, but I hope that you guys understand where I'm coming from. And just let me know what you're thinking. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.